G'day guys, in today's video I'm going to be building the 6 drawers for these 2 bedside tables that I've been working on over the past couple of weeks. Alright, so I've got my drawer sides, my drawer backs and my drawer fronts. My fronts and backs are 19mm thick and my drawer sides are 16mm thick. The reason why the drawer sides are 16mm thick is because these drawer runners are 20mm wide. So I want the drawer sides to be completely supported on the runners at all times. I don't want them to be too thick and they're hanging out here in fresh air, because as they hang out they're going to run back and forward on this edge and run a groove here, which then leaves a little step on this drawer side, which then will run a little groove in this front face frame which shows up on the front, so we don't want that. I've also machined my drawer fronts and sides to be too wide. They don't actually fit inside these openings. I'm going to custom fit each one so that they all fit perfectly. But for now, I need to cut them to length, and I want them to fit inside this opening nice and snug, not too tight, not too loose. I want them in there snug at the moment, because I can always make them smaller later, but I won't be able to make them bigger. Now I can cut my drawer sides, let's say 5mm short from the back, and when I dovetail these fronts I'll put a 5mm lip on the front, so whatever this length is to the front of that minus 5 and 5, so minus 10, which gives me 335. So now with the box sides cut with those rebates on the ends, I can now start fitting these panels. So to start off with, I want to do the front panels first. So they fit side to side here. Same on the top. So that's nice. But they don't fit across the height. They've been deliberately made high. So if I just sit this right on the edge of that face frame, as close to the edge as I can get it, roll that up, that right on the edges, and then get a knife and run it flat across the bottom of that face frame there. So there's a knife line across that top section there. I need to remove all of that. Now, just looking at it, it's fairly parallel, but it's not quite parallel, so I'm going to use a hand plane. So I'll use 2 hand planes, one that's heavy set and one that's light set, so that I can make quick adjustments and then fine adjustments. So I can get the right hand side in, I can get the left hand side in just, but I can't get the middle in, so one of these is bowed up or bowed down, so I'll just take a little bit off the middle so that it fits. Now with the drawer fronts fitted, I now need to fit the drawer sides. Now it needs to fit in through this front opening and push all the way through to the back. Now I machined these up deliberately wide so that I can fit them all individually, just like I did to the drawer fronts. So that's the front of it. So it's tight at the back. So I'll just take it. I'll take a little bit off the back. So that's what we want. We just want it to go in and out. There's a little bit of movement top to bottom, which is okay. I still need a little bit more than that when I'm finished. So I can assemble it like that. So I'll do that to all of the 11 more sides. So now with the drawer sides fitted, I want to make myself a jig for the bandsaw to cut the dovetails, because I don't want to mark out all of these dovetails and then cut them by hand. So if I come across 30mm on X and 240mm on Y, or on the vertical, connect those 2 points, I'll have an 8:1 dovetail ratio. So I've got 3 times 8 is 240 and 3 times 1 is 30. 8:1. Then I can cut that off, put a little bit of a stop up here so it sticks out there somewhere, get a drawer side, put that up against that there, and I'll be able to bring the bandsaw, which is now coming straight, and cut through here, flip this over, cut through here, then move the fence over, and then cut through here, flip it over, cut through there, so on and so forth. And I won't have to mark out all of these dovetails and cut them out by hand. It's much easier, it's much quicker. It's not hand cut, but it's just as bloody good. So then just a little bit of glue for the end stop here. It doesn't really matter how far this sticks out because it's just going to get cut off on the bandsaw anyway. So press and hold that for a minute or two. Maybe put some clamps on there because I've got them here. Alright, so what I'm doing here, I'm just marking a baseline in line with this shoulder on the inside of this drawer sides all the way around. And I have to mark this on all of the drawers. There's no way around it, not by doing it the way that I'm going to make these drawers anyway. Now, because not all these drawer side widths are the same, there's a variance of about 1 millimeter across all 12 pieces. I've just chosen one in the middle, so this is 139.5. I've got some at 139 and some at 140. So this one's basically in the middle, which will be close enough. So to mark out these dovetails, I already know the exact numbers that I need from the computer. So all I need to do is mark them out. So I need my half pin on the end grain to be 6 mil down from the edge. So I just make a mark. Same on the other side. And then I need 33.5. Same from the top and also from the bottom. Because I'm going to make sure that these dovetails, they're symmetrical top to bottom. It saves me some time over on the bandsaw because I can set up the fence for one and then flip the board over to get the other because it'll all be mirrored. And the only difference is the size of the pins become bigger or smaller as the width of the boards or as the width of the side panels change that little bit, but 0.5 mil here or there, I'm not worried about it. 39.5. And then 67. So these are 140 mil in diameter, so these are 140 mil in width, and I want the short section of my pins to be 6 millimeters wide, and that's so that I can get my chisels in through the pin, in through the pin socket this way. Is if you go too thin, you won't be able to get your chisel in that way, and so you won't be able to clean up these faces if you have to. I don't think that I will have to, but I like to give myself the opportunity to be able to do it. So if I've got 140 mil wide and I want a 6 millimeter opening on those pin sockets, 140 divided by 2 is 70 minus 3 mil, I've got 67. So if I go 67 mil from both sides, it'll leave me with a 6 millimeter gap in the middle. If I get a pencil, make a mark here, 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 and here. So now I need to remove that waste, that waste, that waste, and that waste. And then using these marks on the end, I can simply set this up, hold them nice and firm together, move the bandsaw into position, which this is not going to work, so I need to move this all the way over there. My jig's too wide. So now I can just set up my fence to cut this one, and then I'll flip it over, and I'll cut the same one on the other side. Then I'll move it across, cut that one, same again, flip it over, cut that one, so on and so forth until I've got them all cut. And now with these rough cut out on the bandsaw, all I need to do is grab some chisels and clean away any of this waste here, making sure that my visible edges are still nice and crisp at the end of it. So this is going to be a half blind dovetail, so my visible edges is going to be here, 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 here. So all of that top surface must be perfect. The other visible edge will be this rebate along here. Any of this stuff here, 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 I can hack into it, doesn't really matter. All it does is affect the joint strength, but it doesn't affect the visual aesthetic. The other two visible faces are along this top edge here and the bottom edge sort of. The bottom edge isn't really seen unless you take the drawer out of it, but certainly the top edge must be perfect. Not bad. And so the next thing to do is to find a matching set of drawer parts. So I've got a left and a right drawer side and the drawer front, and this is for the right three. that I've marked it. So R3, R3R, and R3L. So I want this connection to be made, so I put this front into my vise just loosely so it doesn't fall down and crash to the floor. Bring this on top, loosen off the vise, lower this down so it sits kind of flush vertically, somewhere about there. Tighten it up so it's not going to move. Line this up with the bottom edge, because my bottom edge is now my reference face on all of this stuff, because the tops won't actually be spot on perfect. They're very close, but they're not perfect. Get that in there, hold that in nice and tight, get that a little tightened down. Get a marking knife and very carefully and very accurately scribe a line around these dovetails. And this is one of the tasks that a sharp marking knife is a lot better than a blunt marking knife. And there I have my dovetails marked into the end of the drawer front, and so I have to route away, or I have to clear away this area, this area, this area, and this area. And it's pretty important to mark which area you want to cut away, because it's so easy just to cut away this area and then you're like, well, that's not going to work. And so there's my drawer side and my drawer front, and I need to sink the drawer side into the drawer front some distance. Now, the distance for what I should do is whatever that distance is here, which is, well, I don't know what it is, let's say it's 14 mil. Sink it in by 14 mil, and the end of my drawer front will be exactly flush to the side of my drawer. But I don't want that, because what happens then is the baseline that I've got along the side of the drawer side will remain there in the finished piece. Now, I don't want the baseline to be in the finished piece, so what I'm going to do, say for example I need to sink that in 14 mil, I'm going to sink it in 13.5 mil, which will leave the drawer sides proud by 1/2 mil. That way when it's all constructed, that's sitting out there like that. I can take a hand plane across the side of it there, clean up those baselines that I've marked in with a marking knife, and it all ends up looking pretty sweet at the end. Now, I've said 1/2 mil there. Those baselines might be deeper than 1/2 mil. I don't really know. It's virtually impossible to measure. So if at the end, after I've got all these assembled and I've planed this down perfectly and it's all fitting into the drawer openings perfectly, and I can't plane down any more, but I've still got some of that baseline showing, like it might be showing just on the bottom half, for example, what I do there, because I can't get rid of it, I'll get my square, get my knife, mark it in there, because it now has to be in there, even though I don't want it to be in there, but it has to be in there because you can't have half there and half not there. It's either there or it's not there. You can't go half and half. So, with that said, I get my handy dandy marking gauge, cutting gauge, set this to the depth of whatever that is, which just happens to be 13.87. This is a digital marking gauge. So if I make the depth 13.37, yep, 13.37, 13.39, yeah, close enough. Let me just check that. Yep, I've gone the right way. And then on the inside face of my drawer fronts, just scribe a line, and it doesn't really matter where I put this line, I can put it all the way across the front. Now I've got the marks on the end, and I need to remove all of that waste down to that line there, not below the line. With one of these drawer fronts in my vise, I've got it level to a false bottom here, just so it lifts it up a little bit above the vise. And I've got my trim router here with a kind of burnt and nasty looking 1/4 inch upcut spiral bit, and I'm just going to use it to hog away the waste. Now I've got my depth set just above that baseline. I don't actually want to hit that baseline because it's pretty easy to clean up with chisels. I could set it up so that the router does it all, but why take the risk when it's pretty easy to use the chisels? So you can see that I'm above the baseline here still, and inside these lines here, I'm still inside there. I haven't gone past it, not past the back, not past this side, not past that side. It's all good. Close, but not too close. The next thing I like to do is get a torch and shine it onto the ends just to make sure that my knife marks, which I made with the knife, are good, because sometimes when I mark out the drawer sides, I get this there, and I get the knife and I mark. Sometimes I miss and I put it on a massive angle like that, and I mark in the middle where I don't want the mark. So whatever these marks are, I might have two marks here. Whatever the mark is closest to this cutout, that's the mark that I'm going to aim for. And by putting a light over it, it casts hard shadows into the knife marks, and I can see which one I actually want, because seeing these knife marks in general is kind of difficult in the end grain, whereas along the face grain you can see it quite clearly, if I could focus a camera, but I can't. I'm sorry about that. But as it turns out, all of my knife marks are all perfect here, we hope. And that's the other thing. The only thing I have to go off right now are these knife marks. If the knife marks are wrong, I'm going to get gaps in the joinery. Or if the knife marks are wrong, the joints won't fit together. It's just bad luck. If I've screwed up putting these marks in there, it's my fault, my problem. Anyways, I've got a whole bunch of extra material here in these corners, so I've got to clear away that before I can get anywhere near those knife marks. So using nice sharp chisels. Whoa, holy shit. So it's all right. The leg would have caught that chisel. You know, my unprotected fleshy legs. So I just want to clear away all of this extra waste as best I can. And I want to do it quickly, but I don't want to rush my way through it and put a chisel through my leg or through the old fella, because that's down there too. So I just want to get it done, but I don't want to get too close to those lines in a rush. I just want to nibble away as close as possible. Without actually hitting it, and I just hit it. Bloody idiot. And just hit it again. So I'm not using a hammer here, I'm slicing down the end grain, so it's very easy to slice through it. It basically just separates the grain quite easily. And because the grain is nice and straight, it doesn't deflect the chisel much at all. And the only thing that I'm worried about is this top surface here. The rest of it gets covered, so these back edges here and the bottom edge there, it all gets covered up, so it's only the top entry of the dovetail that matters visually. The rest of it's just structural, and even then most of it's not structural, because you've got the connection between this face here, and the thing that's end grain to long grain, or the long grain there. It's only the connection between these two side angled faces that creates both the mechanical joint and the glue joint, which creates a very strong joint overall. But the rest of it's all long grain to end grain, not worth a cracker. All right, let's speed this up a bit. Whee! So now with the waste mostly wasted away, I now need to make some very accurate cuts by placing the chisel into these knife lines, if I can find them, which I can't. So if I get a torch, now I can at least see them. You actually feel the knife fall into the, you feel the chisel fall into the knife line. And all I'm doing is I'm just holding it there and holding it nice and plumb in the knife line, and then I just press down. And because I'm not actually, you can't actually see any of this back face here, it doesn't really matter if I get it perfectly square or not. Like, as long as I get it close, it becomes a nice strong joint. What you want to make sure that you don't do is that you don't want to get too ambitious and put the chisel out here beyond your baseline, because that will put a great big ding in there. And you've got to make sure that the lands of your chisel are also clear of that baseline, because as it comes down, it puts a little divot right on that point there, which is what I've done earlier, just once. It's nothing that can't be fixed, but it's something that needs to be fixed. And fixing stuff sucks. So that's the sides of the dovetails. Now I need to clean up this baseline here. I could do it from the position that I'm in now, but I can't really see if that chisel is square, or plumb rather. Like, I can guess, but it's probably going to go that way, it's going to go this way. I don't really know. So I'm going to move myself into your position. Now I can see if I've got my chisel in this baseline and it isn't cocked one way or the other. So it's nice and square with the base. And I can also hold it up here and I can sight straight through here and see that it's nice and plumb. So I get it in there, just press down, that's pretty good. Now that I've got this section of the baseline cut, I can put the chisel up against that baseline and kind of roll it over, and it gives me a pretty good indication of where the chisel needs to go. It's going to naturally want to fall into the rest of that baseline here, but it also marries up what I've already cut quite nicely. I can just chisel that down, come back to the other side, chisel that down. This needs a little bit of cleanup in that corner. So on and so forth. Now these areas here and here, they're your major problem points. If I've got these tails, when I bring these tails in and I knock them down, if these tails are too big for that opening there, it's going to put a lot of sideways pressure on this wall here. And because I've only got that tiny amount of timber holding this on, all it does is it cracks it. Cracks it here, or it cracks it across the face. Both of them are terrible. You can fix both of them because it's quite common, but it really sucks when it happens. So we're trying to get everything nice and tight, but too tight means problems. Like, simple as that. How do you know it's too tight? You'll figure it out after you've cracked it. And it's kind of difficult to get a square chisel into this angled corner here. Now you can get like fishtail chisels that get in there. It's actually got a little bit of an angle to the front edge of the chisel there, and that'd be really nice to have. I don't have one. I'm not going to buy one, so I'm just going to make do with what I've got, or perhaps one day I might make one. But obviously, if I was to get a big chisel, well, that doesn't even fit. If I was to get a bigger chisel and I'm trying to get this little dag out of that corner there, well, there's no way I can get this wider chisel into that point there close enough to be able to pull this dags out. So that's why I use a skinnier chisel. And I'm not really focused on getting a nice clean joint or clean cuts. I'm just trying to get the waste out of there. I really don't care if it's clean or nasty looking. Once I fill it with a dovetail later on, you won't see it for another million years. And this here, I just want to put the chisel up against that pin wall and just create that nice sharp point right there, and then I can just pull the fibers away from that corner, because I can't really get in there and cut them away. So I'll just pull them away as if they're straws, and then they just break off. Same on this corner here. All I do is I slide it in there, and then I roll the chisel over and it just peels it away. So now, technically, these dovetails should fit inside there. However, I haven't taken the sockets down to depth yet. I'm slightly short because when I put the router in there, I didn't cut that to depth quite deliberately, because I can fix it up with a chisel right now. A light chamfer, 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 chamfer. Now you can see that I haven't started any of those chamfers right at the end here. They're all started 3 or 4 mil in from the end, because I need the ends to remain nice and crisp. This being the good face, I want nice and clean. I just want to knock off these corners, but leaving the external corner nice and crisp. So, just like that. And then put a 45 along the bottom edge of these pins, and this one's really important. What that does is it creates a V shape into the pin, and so as it inserts itself into the pin socket, if the pin is too wide for the socket, the 45 will not only guide it down, but it will allow the socket or the pin to compress that little bit, instead of having the two sharp edges just shear themselves off. So this one's really important. I highly recommend you put in the 45 degrees along this bottom edge here. Basically, it's a cold dark day in hell before I don't do that. I'll do it every single time, even if people say that I'm a hack. And we trim away all this waste, keeping in mind that we want to keep this shoulder nice and clean, the shoulder of the rebate. Don't go hacking into that, because that's an exposed edge. and then I just went and stuck my chisel into it. And then I want to put a light chamfer along this bottom edge of these pins. So just get a block plane. A light chamfer. Now that doesn't really do anything. It simply clears away this sharp corner there, so that if on the pin sockets inside there, if chisel's too big, if that corner isn't quite clean, that just gives me a little bit of clearance so that whatever's crap is inside there has clearance to be there without getting in the way. And now, because I put the block plane across there, I've got all these broken off corners. I just want to clean these off. Just nice and easy. Now we're ready to test fit. And then before actually fitting it, just bring the two joints together, and you want to sight directly down, just to make sure that you're not going to be completely wrong here. So with a bit of luck, you could probably see a black line at each joint, just the tiniest amount of black line. Now, if you can't see a black line, I'm looking at this, I might have a bit of a problem on this point here. I think that this pin might be a little bit too wide for that pin socket. But you've got to take into account that I might be able to compress this pin just that little bit without splitting the drawer face. It's a bit of a risk, but we'll see how we go. So, nice gentle taps with a dead blow mallet, just softly, softly. And you want to tap all the way left and right, left and right, left and right. You don't want to just tap all the right hand side in at once and then try to bring the right hand side down, because that'll skew the drawer side so much that it will pop out these sides 100% of the time. So as I go, I'm watching for things like a crack forming here or here, same on the other side, there or there. I'm also watching these edges here, 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 and here, all of those top edges, because if they catch on the edge of the drawer front, it gets up under it and just lifts it up out of there. So I'm watching for all of this, so gently, gently, tappy, tappy. We have a success, and I've got, there's my knife, get it in focus right about here. I think I've got a little gap on that top corner there, tiny little gap. What else have I got? Can't really see in the screen, I can't get my face in front of the screen. I think I've got a little gap there as well, a little gap here as well. So not too shabby, pretty bloody good. I've seen worse, I've done worse. This one's pretty good. So I'll do the other one and I'll get back to you. So that's your outside joint. And on the inside, because I put that rebate into the side there, it leaves a nice clean line straight up and down. Now, what can happen without that rebate being in there, you get something like this happening. Let's see if I can get this on camera. You get something like, Oh, that's exaggerated, but you'll get something like that. You can see how there's a gap at every pin socket there. That's what happens when you don't have the shoulder on the drawer sides and you've done a pretty bad job of dovetailing. So that shoulder is just a little bit of insurance that gives a nice, clean, crisp line up there. That's why I do it. That's why I did it. And then to separate these, hold the drawer front and tap the drawer side many, many times, nice and gently. Voila! There we go. A single shot. I don't know how long this took, but it worked. I'm happy with that. You guys happy with that? Everybody's happy with that. Happy, happy, joy, joy. If you know what that means, you really watch some crappy cartoons. All good.